that's a perfect segue into talking about telemedicine because, you and I both know some practices that are just absolutely flourishing since they've adopted telemedicine. So maybe you can just walk through how in your mind or when you've talked to your clients, how a good telemedicine appointment goes.
Yeah, for sure. There's kind of a few key things that have emerged for us as differentiators between the practices that are doing, let's say, a fantastic job. And by that, let's say upwards of 10 consults a day, $1,000 in just telemedicine revenue, just telemedicine consult revenue. And those that, are only doing a few bookings a day. So when I kind of think about at least our company, but at a high level, the framework that practices could think of for like scheduled telemedicine consults, we can get into like other different forms. There's kind of three components. You need some sort of scheduling, you need some way to collect payment, and then some way to actually provide the care itself. From a scheduling perspective, one of the best practices that we've seen is the idea to be able to create kind of blocks of time or separation between the veterinarians that are responsible for providing that curbside care and the veterinarians that are going to be providing the dedicated telemedicine consults. And there's a couple obvious reasons for that, but a couple non-obvious reasons for that. The first is if you have a veterinarian that is responsible for both telemedicine calls and the drop-offs, those drop-offs are always going to take top priority. And so you end up creating a situation where there's a lot of distraction and defocusing. And in light of what's coming in the door, those patients are going to take priority, and the model sort of collapses onto itself. The other thing is that one of the advantages of having dedicated doctor hours is that you can actually you can get into the flow of those appointments as opposed to hopping between different activities, which again can be really distracting and make you less efficient. And then the third is it allows you to use resources outside of the practice. So the clinics that we've seen from a scheduling perspective are basically saying, look, here's a doctor that's available for telemedicine. We're going to book those appointments in, and we're going to allow them to really focus on providing that digital care without necessarily being responsible for what happens when people come in. So that's one key point. The second, which relates to the schedule, is that the front desk needs to act as an advocate for the service. So the clinics, one of the questions that we often get asked is, what cases should we practice telemedicine on? And the most successful practices that we've seen actually kind of invert the question, where they instead look at it from the perspective of everything's a telemedicine case, unless there is a set of reasons why this needs to be an urgent care. And that's not to say that those patients might not necessarily have to come back into the practice, but what we've seen is that the clinics that are not doing or not utilizing telemedicine or some sort of triage or system for those curbside appointments are ending up with longer appointment times, more communication with the clients when they're waiting at their cars, and an inability to kind of get the pet and just execute on the treatment plan. And so we see that as opposed to there being kind of two parallel paths, telemedicine is kind of the default first step. And if your pet does need to come in, they know what they're coming in for. You can educate the clients upfront as to what the process is going to be, drive compliance and adherence to your plan, manage the payment so that when the pet does get dropped off, it's executing against that plan, which is a very different workflow than most of the curbside experience that clinics are currently adopting. So those are kind of two big key ones that we've seen emerge. Maybe one last one on the pricing side. Most of the clinics that we've seen be successful have a pricing structure where they're charging at or near their existing consult fee. So they're not charging $20 or $30 to hop on a 30-minute call. They're charging somewhere between $75 or $100. I think our average consult fee right now on our platform is about $90. However, the caveat is if you need to come in as a result of this consult, they don't charge them another exam fee. And that's almost important for both, I think, your staff and your clients to reinforce the value of this process. Because if you're treating it like a lesser option, your clients are going to interpret it as a lesser option. Your staff aren't going to want to recommend it. They're not going to be confident when they explain it on the phone. And so this allows you to create a model where you're basically reinforcing the value of your time, demonstrating to your clients that this is going to be a valuable interaction and that you can actually do quite a bit for their pet, and then giving them the peace of mind if they do need to be brought in, that they're not going to get double charged or somehow there's going to be a fee that's snuck in there. Right. So those are kind of maybe three keys differences that we've seen in best practices between the practices that are struggling and those that are being much more successful.
Okay.